The great hall of the Galactic Council felt empty. Ambassador Zethkari looked across the curved rows of seats that stretched up toward the crystal dome ceiling. 47 different species sat in their designated areas, but the silence was wrong. It had been wrong for 3 years now. Where the human delegation once sat, 12 empty chairs remained. The seats were still there, kept clean by the maintenance drones, but nobody talked about removing them. Nobody wanted to be the one to suggest it. Zethkari adjusted his breathing apparatus and stood at the central podium. His forearms moved in the traditional greeting pattern as his translator began converting his words into the 46 other languages spoken in the chamber. Fellow counselors, we gather again to discuss the trade disruptions in Sector 7, he began. The shipping lanes between Veltar space and the Outer Rim territories continue to experience delays. Counselor Valthos' crystalline form flickered with blue light as she responded. The delays stem from inadequate security protocols. Without proper enforcement, merchants refuse to travel those routes. The security was always handled by joint patrols, said Admiral Cross, his scaled head turning toward the empty human section. Those ships are gone now. An uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. It always came back to this. Every discussion, every problem, every solution somehow connected to the absent humans. Zeth single quotes Carey had been on the council for 15 years. He remembered when the humans first arrived 40 years ago. They were young compared to most species. Their technology was basic. Their ships were loud and clumsy. Many counselors had wondered why they deserved a seat at all. But humans had something others didn't understand then. They listened. They asked questions. They cared about problems that weren't their own. Perhaps we should review the final transmission again, suggested Dr. Molthik from the archives section. The elderly sage's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among his people. That serves no purpose, Velthara said sharply. They left. They made their choice. Did they? Molthik's voice carried the weight of centuries. Or did we make it for them? Zethkari felt the tension in the room rise. Nobody wanted to discuss what had really happened 3 years ago. The Harmony Accords were supposed to be their greatest achievement. Unity across the galaxy. Progress toward a perfect civilization. The transmission had arrived on a Tuesday Galactic Standard Time. Zethkari remembered because he had been planning to invite the human ambassador to his daughter's bonding ceremony. Elena Vasquez always brought interesting gifts and told wonderful stories. The message was brief. No anger, no threats. No demands for negotiation. The Terran Confederation withdraws from all galactic affairs, effective immediately. Do not follow. That was it. 12 words that ended 40 years of partnership. Within 72 hours, every human colony, research station, and diplomatic outpost had been abandoned. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Simply emptied. Millions of humans had vanished from the galaxy as if they had never existed. The trade routes aren't the real problem, said Councillor Thrain, speaking for the first time that day. The hegemony representative rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. Our conflict resolution protocols have failed in 14 different sectors since the humans left. We have established procedures, Velthara replied. Logical, efficient procedures. That don't work, Thrain said bluntly. The Kalar and Vreni have been fighting over mining rights in the Deneb system for 8 months now. Before, a human mediator would have solved this in weeks. Humans were too emotional in their judgments, said Councillor Zarian, his mechanical voice echoing in the chamber. They based decisions on feelings rather than facts. And yet their emotional decisions prevented more wars than our logical ones have caused. Molthik observed. Ze Turkari remembered the Proxima incident 15 years ago. 3 species had claimed the same planet. The logical solution was to divide it by population and resource. Contribution. Fair. Efficient. The humans had suggested something different. Ambassador Chun, Elena's predecessor, had spent weeks with each delegation. He learned their histories, their cultures, their dreams. Then he proposed something impossible. All three species would share the planet, with each group contributing their unique strengths to build something new. The other counselors had called it foolish, inefficient, waste of resources. Proxima was now the most prosperous world in that sector. The Mercy protocols have been suspended in 4 systems, reported Admiral Cross. Refugee assistance, medical aid, disaster relief. The logistics were deemed too expensive. Humans always voted to maintain those programs, Thrain said quietly, even when it cost them resources they needed for their own colonies. Another uncomfortable silence. Sefkari looked around the chamber and saw something he had never noticed before. Fear. Not the fear of external threats or military defeat. Fear of themselves. Fear of what they were becoming. The cultural exchange programs have ended, added Counselor Yilan, her feathered crest drooping. No more art festivals. No more music competitions. No more literature sharing between worlds. Those activities serve no productive purpose, Zarian stated. Didn't they? Molfik asked. When was the last time you felt wonder, Counselor Zarian? When did you last see something beautiful that wasn't related to efficiency or profit? The mechanical being's lights flickered. He had no answer. Zethkari thought about his daughter. She was 23 now, an adult by his species standards. But she still kept the human books Elena had given her years ago. Stories about heroes who fought for others, not for themselves. Tales of sacrifice and hope and the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. His daughter had asked him once why the humans left. He had told her it was complicated, that adults sometimes disagreed about important things. But the truth was simpler and more terrible. They had left because they could not watch what the galaxy was becoming. They could not be part of a civilization that valued efficiency over compassion, logic over empathy, progress over people. The session is adjourned, Zethkari announced. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the mining dispute in the Deneb system. As the counselors filed out, Zethkari remained at the podium. He looked again at the empty human seats and wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Not just in passing the Harmony Accords, but in not understanding what they were losing until it was already gone. In the silence of the empty chamber, he could almost hear Elena's voice, asking the question she had posed so many times. What kind of galaxy do we want to leave for our children? Now, 3 years too late, they were finally beginning to understand her meaning. 6 months before the humans disappeared, the council chambers had buzzed with excitement. The Harmony Accords represented everything the Galactic Council claimed to stand for: unity, progress, and logical thinking. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat in her usual seat, reviewing the proposal on her datapad. Around her, the other human delegates whispered among themselves. Their faces showed concern, but Elena's expression remained carefully neutral. The proposal is elegant in its simplicity, announced Counselor Velthara, her crystalline form glowing with satisfaction. All member species will undergo genetic optimization to eliminate inefficient traits. No more wasted resources on emotional decision-making. No more conflicts based on cultural misunderstandings. Elena raised her hand. May I ask what you define as inefficient traits? Excessive emotional responses, replied Dr. Zarian. His mechanical voice showed no hint of doubt. Irrational attachment to outdated customs. Resistance to logical improvement. And who decides what constitutes logical improvement? Elena's translator carried her words clearly through the chamber. The Optimization Committee, of course, said Counselor Yixer. his 8 legs clicking on the chamber floor. Comprised of our most advanced species, those who have already achieved peak efficiency. Elena looked around the chamber. She saw the Christarch delegation, beings of pure silicon who had eliminated all emotional responses centuries ago. The Veltar Syndicate, who controlled their population through precise genetic manipulation. The Depth Lords, who had converted their entire species into living computers. Advanced, efficient, perfect, and utterly sterile. What about diversity? Asked Captain Morrison, one of Elena's advisors. Different species bring different strengths. Different perspectives solve different problems. Diversity leads to conflict, Valthara responded. Observe the current disputes in 12 sectors, all caused by species acting according to their nature rather than logical principles. Elena remembered the sanctuary crisis from 2 months earlier. A plague had struck the fringe worlds, killing millions. The logical response was quarantine, seal off the affected systems and wait for the disease to burn itself out. Humans had violated the quarantine. Captain Sarah Chun had taken 3 hospital ships into the plague zone. The council had ordered her to withdraw. The infection was too dangerous. The cost too high. The logical thing was to sacrifice those worlds to save the rest. Chun had replied with 12 words that still echoed in Elena's mind. We don't abandon people. That's not who we are. Chun out. She had saved 40 million lives and found a cure that protected the entire galaxy. The council had censured her for violating orders. The emotional responses you call inefficient, Elena said carefully, have solved more problems than they've created. The Proxima Accords, the Meridian Peace Treaty, the Great Library Preservation Project. All of these succeeded because different species contributed different strengths. And all took longer than necessary, Zarian replied. The optimization protocols would have achieved the same results in half the time. Would they? Elena stood, her voice rising slightly. The Proxima Accords worked because 3 species learned to appreciate each other's cultures. Your optimization would have eliminated those cultures entirely. Cultures are inefficient, said Counselor Drex, his massive form shifting in his specially designed chair. They cause confusion. Waste resources on meaningless rituals. Create loyalty to concepts rather than logic. Elena felt anger building in her chest. Not the hot, explosive anger that led to mistakes, but the cold, determined anger that led to action. She looked at her fellow humans and saw the same feeling reflected in their faces. Let me understand this correctly, she said. You want to genetically modify every species to eliminate what makes them unique. Remove their emotions, their cultures, their individual ways of thinking. Turn the entire galaxy into copies of yourselves. Not copies, Valthara corrected. Improvements. Enhanced versions optimized for galactic harmony. Harmony, Elena repeated. Is that what you call this? She gestured to the chamber around them. When humans had first joined the council, this space had been alive with color and sound. Each species had contributed to the design. Calacrystal sculptures caught the light in rainbow patterns. Rennie music played softly in the background. Hegemony tapestries told stories of ancient heroes. Now the chamber was white, clean, efficient, beautiful. Things had been removed because they served no logical purpose. The Accords represent the future, announced Supreme Counselor Thex Moran, speaking for the first time during the session. His authority was absolute. His word was law among most species. Evolution toward perfection. An end to the chaos of individual thought. Individual thought isn't chaos, Elena said. It's the source of everything good we've ever accomplished. Name one achievement that required individual thought, Zarian challenged. Elena smiled sadly. Love, art, hope, the willingness to sacrifice for strangers, the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. Everything that makes life worth living instead of just surviving. Emotional concepts with no practical application, Drex rumbled. Really? Elena pulled out her datapad and began reading. Stardate 2387.4. Humans violate quarantine to save the fringe worlds. Practical result. 40 million lives saved. Galactic plague cured. Stardate 2389.2. Humans share warp technology freely instead of selling it. Practical result. Exploration increased by 400%. 17 new worlds discovered. Stardate 2391.7. Humans establish refugee assistance protocols. Practical result. 3 civil wars ended through humanitarian aid instead of military intervention. The chamber had grown quiet. Elena continued. Stardate 2393.1. Human poet creates work celebrating Christarch mathematical beauty. Practical result. Christarch and Kylar alliance formed, ending centuries of war. Stardate 2394.6. Humans institute mercy protocols for prisoners of war. Practical result. Surrender rates increase. Wars end faster with fewer casualties. She looked directly at Supreme Counselor Dexmaron. Every single one of these achievements came from emotional, irrational, inefficient human thinking. And every single one made the galaxy a better place. The past is irrelevant, Dexmaron said coldly. The Harmony Accords will be voted on tomorrow. The proposal has sufficient support to pass. Elena felt something break inside her chest. Not anger anymore. Something deeper and sadder. The realization that 40 years of partnership meant nothing to these beings she had considered friends. Then I have only one thing left to say, Elena said. You speak of harmony, but you mean homogeny. You want to erase what makes each of us unique in favor of what you call optimization. We've seen this before in our history. We won't be part of it again. She gathered her datapad and looked around the chamber one last time. When you vote tomorrow, remember this moment. Remember that diversity isn't weakness. Remember that efficiency isn't the only value worth pursuing. Remember that some things are worth preserving, even if they don't make logical sense. Elena walked toward the exit, followed by the rest of the human delegation. At the door, she turned back. We came to the stars hoping to find others who shared our dreams of a better universe. We found beings who wanted to make us all the same. That's not progress. That's the end of everything that makes life worth living. The next day, the Harmony Accords passed by a vote of 46-2. Only humans and the mysterious Wanderer Coalition voted against it. Within a week, human colonies across the galaxy began shutting down. The beings they had called friends watched them pack their ships and wondered why the humans seemed so sad to leave. They would understand the answer soon enough. Dr. Cassie Land stared at the screen in her research lab, watching the same video for the 100th time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the council podium, speaking about something called mercy. The human woman's face showed emotion clearly. Something Cassilan had once found primitive and inefficient. Now she found it fascinating. 3 years ago, Cassilan had been among the strongest supporters of the Harmony Accords. As a leading sociologist of the Veltar Syndicate, she had written papers proving that emotional decision-making led to chaos. She had data. She had logic. She had been completely wrong. The galaxy was falling apart. Her communication device chimed. Another urgent message from the council. The 14th this month. Cassian sighed and opened the file. Border Conflict Report, Sector 12. Kalar and Vreni. Forces have engaged in 17 separate incidents over mining rights in the Deneb system. Mediation attempts have failed. Military intervention may be necessary. Cassian closed the file and opened another one from her personal archives. It was marked Resolved Conflicts, Human Mediation. The list was enormous. Hundreds of disputes, all settled without violence. She selected one at random. Altair Shipping Dispute, year 2391. 3 species claiming exclusive trade rights to profitable shipping lanes. Human mediator Ambassador Chun suggests rotating access schedules based on seasonal needs of each species' homeworlds. Solution implemented successfully. All parties satisfied. Simple, elegant, something no one else had thought of because it required understanding what each species actually needed, not just what they demanded. Cassian left her lab and walked through the corridors of the Veltar research station. Everything was clean and efficient. White walls, soft lighting, the gentle hum of perfect technology. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt empty. She passed the recreation area, where researchers once gathered to share stories from different worlds. Now it was used only for mandatory exercise periods. The art gallery had been converted to additional laboratory space because art served no practical purpose. The music room had been sealed off entirely after too many staff members were found wasting time listening to Terran symphonies. Her destination was Archive Level 7, the deepest part of the station. The door required special authorization. Inside, millions of files contained everything the Veltar had learned about other species during their membership in the Council. Most of it was about humans. Cassian had begun this research 3 months ago, after the Mercy protocols were officially suspended. The decision had been logical, cost-effective, and absolutely correct, according to every economic model the Council used. It was also the moment she realized they had made a terrible mistake. The Mercy protocols had been a human creation, established 40 years ago during their first major Council vote. Simple rules. Provide aid to refugees regardless of species. Treat prisoners of war with dignity. And never abandon civilians during conflicts. The protocols had cost the Council enormous resources. Ships, medical supplies, personnel, time. From an efficiency standpoint, suspending them saved money that could be used for more important projects. The results had been immediate. Refugee populations doubled as planets no longer received evacuation assistance. Prisoners of war began fighting to the death rather than surrendering to forces known for brutality. Civilian casualties increased by 300% as military commanders stopped worrying about non-combatant welfare. The galaxy had become more efficient. It had also become crueler. Cassian accessed the file she had been working on for weeks. It was a comprehensive analysis of human behavior patterns, based on 40 years of interaction data. What she had discovered challenged everything she thought. She knew about civilization. Humans were statistical anomalies. They were the only species that consistently voted against their own interests if it helped others. They had supported trade agreements that gave them smaller profits but lifted up developing worlds. They had shared technology freely instead of selling it. They had volunteered for dangerous missions to help species they had never met. None of it made logical sense. All of it had made the galaxy better. Computer, display analysis summary, she said aloud. The screen filled with data. Charts and graphs showing correlation patterns between human presence and positive outcomes across thousands of different scenarios. In 2,847 recorded conflicts involving human mediation. The success rate was 94.3%. Average time to resolution, 3.2 standard months. In 1,256 recorded conflicts using standard Council protocols, the success rate was 31.7%. Average time to resolution, 14.8 standard months. Cassian scrolled through more data. Human-advocated policies resulted in 73% reduction in civilian casualties during military conflicts. Trade agreements with human input showed 45% higher satisfaction rates among all participating species. Cultural exchange programs initiated by humans led to 89% reduction in prejudice-based incidents between member species. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans hadn't just been members of the Council. They had been its conscience. Her communication device chimed again. This time, it was a personal message from her colleague Dr. Malthik, the Council Archivist. Castellan, I need you to see something. Archive Chamber 1, immediately. She found the elderly sage surrounded by holographic displays showing communication logs from across the galaxy. His 6 eyes were blinking rapidly, a sign of extreme distress among his people. What is it? She asked. I've been analyzing communication patterns since the humans left, he said without preamble. The content of messages between worlds. The tone. The level of cooperation. He gestured to the displays. Look at these statistics. The data was shocking. Positive communications between species had dropped by 60%. Requests for assistance had decreased by 80%, not because help wasn't needed, but because no one expected it to be given. Trade negotiations were taking 4 times longer and failing twice as often. But here's what really concerns me, Malthik continued. He highlighted a specific data set. Violence is increasing. Not just border conflicts or resource disputes. Personal violence, crime, even domestic abuse rates among member species have risen significantly. I don't understand, Castellan said. Those are internal matters. They shouldn't be affected by council politics. That's what I thought too, Malthik replied. Until I found this. He showed her a communication from the Kalar homeworld. It was a suicide message from a young artist who could no longer find meaning in a world that valued only efficiency. She mentions humans specifically, Malthik said quietly. Says they were the only ones who understood that beauty mattered. That stories mattered. That hope mattered. Castellan felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Guilt. Pure, irrational, completely illogical guilt. How many of these messages have you found? She asked. Thousands, Malthik replied. From every member species. Young people especially. They remember the cultural exchange programs, the art festivals, the music competitions. They remember feeling like they were part of something larger than themselves. He pulled up another file. But it's not just young people. Look at this. The message was from Admiral Cross of the Hegemony Navy, an official military report that ended with an unexpected personal note. Request permission to retire from active service. Can no longer find honor in conflicts that would have been prevented by human mediation. The galaxy has become a smaller, darker place. Castellan sat down heavily. The weight of understanding was crushing. They had driven away the one species that cared about everyone else. They had chosen efficiency over empathy, logic over love, progress over people. What have we done? She whispered. Malthik's ancient voice carried the weight of centuries. We have learned the difference between being right and being wise. The question now is whether it's too late to learn from our mistake. As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency broadcasts filled the air. Another war had started. Another conflict that could have been prevented if someone had cared enough to listen to both sides. Castellan looked at the data surrounding them. 40 years of evidence that the galaxy was better with humans in it. 3 years of proof that it was falling apart without them. No, she said firmly. It's not too late. But we need to do something no one has tried yet. What's that? We need to admit we were wrong. And then we need to become the kind of people they would want to come back to. The alarms continued to sound. But for the first time in years, Cassian felt something that had almost been forgotten in the galaxy: hope. Captain Thrallvex had been searching for 3 weeks when he found the first clue. His ship, the hegemony vessel Persistence, drifted in space above what had once been New Geneva, a human research colony on the edge of known space. The colony was intact. That was the first surprise. Every report suggested the humans had abandoned their settlements in panic, leaving destruction behind them. But New Geneva looked like its inhabitants had simply stepped out for a moment. Gardens were still growing. Power systems hummed quietly. Even the orbital defense platforms remained functional. Life signs? Thrallvex asked his science officer. Negative, Captain, Lieutenant Kess replied. But there are automated systems maintaining everything. The entire colony is preserved perfectly. Thrallvex had volunteered for this mission against direct orders from the Council. Officially, searching for humans was forbidden. They had made their choice and should be left alone. Unofficially, too many Council members were asking the same question. Where had they gone? Take us down, he ordered. I want to see this place. The shuttle landed in New Geneva's Central Plaza. Thrallvex stepped out on the stone pathways lined with flowering trees from a dozen different worlds. Human, Kala, Veltar, even some rare crystarch meditation crystals arranged in careful patterns thought it was beautiful. That was illegal now under the Harmony Accords. Beauty served no logical purpose. Captain, you need to see this, called Security Chief Orcs. She was standing beside a large memorial statue made of black stone. As Thrallvex approached, he realized it wasn't human dot. It was a perfect sculpture of Admiral Kestoran, the hegemony war hero who had died defending a refugee convoy 20 years ago. The inscription was in perfect hegemony script. To those who sacrifice for strangers, the stars themselves sing praise. Why would humans build a monument to one of our people? Oryx asked. Thrallvex studied the statue. The detail was extraordinary. Every scale on Kestoran's face was perfect. The artist had clearly spent months studying hegemony anatomy and culture to create this work. Because they understood honor better than we do, he said quietly. They found more monuments throughout the colony. A Veltar scientist who had died developing plague vaccines. A Kalar engineer who had sacrificed herself to save a mining station. A crystarch philosopher who had spent centuries promoting peace between species. Heroes from every member race. All remembered by humans who had never met them. The library was even more surprising. Thousands of books, art pieces, and cultural artifacts from every council species. Not just human collections, but careful recreations of works that had been lost or destroyed over the centuries. Songs that hadn't been heard for generations. Poems written in languages some species had forgotten. They were preserving our cultures, Lieutenant Kess observed. Things we didn't even know were disappearing. Thrallvex picked up a book written in ancient hegemony script. It was a collection of traditional war poems, the kind his grandfather used to recite, but that had been deemed inefficient by modern standards. He had thought they were lost forever. Captain, called Engineer Vuss from across the library. There's a secured section here. Looks like it requires special access. They found the archive in the basement of the research center. The door was locked with a quantum encryption system that would have been impossible to break. But beside the lock was a simple note written in multiple languages. For the Council, when you are ready to remember who you used to be. The door opened at Thrallvex Sech. Inside were thousands of data storage units, each carefully labeled with the name of a Council species. Thrallvex selected one marked Hegemony, Cultural Preservation Project. The first file was a complete musical recording of the Twilight Symphony, a piece that hadn't been performed in 50 years because it was considered too emotional for modern audiences. The second was a detailed analysis of hegemony military honor codes. with suggestions for adapting them to peacekeeping roles. The third file made him sit down hard in the nearest chair. It was a medical breakthrough. A cure for hegemon-scale rot, the genetic disease that had been killing his people for generations. The research was complete, tested, ready for implementation. All the humans had needed was council approval to begin mass production. They had been planning to give this away for free. "Captain," Lieutenant Kess called from another terminal. "You need to see this." She was reading a file marked Emergency Protocols, Galactic Pandemic Response. It contained detailed plans for coordinating medical assistance across all member species, including treatments for diseases that hadn't even been discovered yet. They were preparing for disasters that might happen, she said in amazement. Planning to help us with problems we didn't even have. Thrallvex moved to another terminal and found files marked Diplomatic Enhancement Protocols. Inside were detailed cultural guides for every council species, including psychological profiles explaining how to communicate effectively with each race during times of stress or conflict. The humans had been studying them, not to find weaknesses to exploit, but to find better ways to help. How long had they been working on this? Oryx asked. Thr all single quotes Vex checked the file dates. Some of these go back 20 years. They'd been planning to share all of this for decades. More files revealed more gifts. New technology that would revolutionize space travel. Agricultural techniques that could end hunger on resource-poor worlds. Educational programs that could prevent conflicts before they started. All of it prepared in advance. All of it ready to be freely shared. They knew, Lieutenant Kess said quietly. They knew what the Council was becoming, and they were trying to save us from ourselves. Thrallvex found the file. It was a personal message from Ambassador Elena Vasquez, recorded just days before the Harmony Accords vote. Her image appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. "If you're watching this," she began, "it means we've left, and you finally come looking for answers. We hoped it wouldn't come to this. We hoped the vote would fail, that wisdom would prevail over fear." She paused, looking directly at the camera. Everything in this archive was meant to be presented to the Council over the next 5 years. Medical breakthroughs, technological advances, cultural preservation projects, peace-building initiatives. We believed the galaxy was evolving toward true cooperation, where different species would work together while maintaining what made them unique. Elena's voice grew sad. The Harmony Accords showed us we were wrong. You don't want cooperation. You want conformity. You don't want diversity. You want uniformity. And we cannot be part of a galaxy that believes efficiency is more important than empathy. The message continued for several minutes, explaining the purpose of each archive and how the knowledge could be used to help the galaxy. At the end, Elena's voice softened. "We're not abandoning you out of anger. We're leaving out of love. Love for what you used to be, and hope for what you might become again. When you're ready to remember that differences make us stronger, not weaker, you'll know where to find us." The message ended with coordinates to 12 other human colonies, each containing similar archives. Thrallvex stared at the blank screen for a long time. Around him, his crew continued exploring the data, their voices filled with wonder and growing shame. "Captain," Arik said finally, "what do we do with all this?" "We bring it to the Council," he replied, "and we tell them the truth. The humans weren't just another member species. They were the best part of what we could have been." As his crew prepared to download the archive, Thrallvex walked back to the Memorial Plaza. He stood before the statue of Admiral Kesteran and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Humility. The humans had understood honor better than the hegemony. They had understood logic better than the Veltar. They had understood beauty better than anyone. Most importantly, they had understood that civilizations weren't built on efficiency or conformity. They were built on hope, sacrifice, and the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. Now the question was whether the galaxy could learn to understand it too, before it was too late to matter. The council chamber had never been so quiet. 47 species sat in perfect silence as Captain Thrallvex finished his presentation. The data from 12 human colonies floated in holographic displays around the room, showing gift after gift that had been prepared, but never given. Ambassador Zethkari looked around the chamber and saw something he had never witnessed before. Shame. On every face, in every gesture. In the way, representatives avoided looking at each other or at the empty human seats. They had driven away the most generous species in the galaxy. The evidence is clear, Dr. Kesselin said, breaking the silence. She had arrived from her research station that morning, carrying additional data that made the situation even worse. Humanity was not just a member of this council. They were its moral center. Without them, we are failing in every measure that actually matters. Councillor Velthara's crystalline form flickered weakly. The harmony accords were logical, efficient. They should have worked. They did work, Dr. Molfick replied from his position at the archive station. Exactly as intended. We created a galaxy where efficiency matters more than empathy, where progress is measured by uniformity rather than cooperation, where being right is more important than being wise. Supreme Counselor Thenmarin had said nothing during the entire presentation. His massive form remained still as stone, but those who knew him could see the tension in his posture. What do you propose? He asked finally. Zethkari stood slowly. He'd been thinking about this question for weeks, ever since Thrallvex had sent the first reports from New Geneva. We have two choices, he said. We can continue as we are, pretending the humans were wrong to leave, that efficiency and logic are enough to build a civilization. Or we can admit the truth. We made a terrible mistake. And then what? Asked Admiral Cross. Send a message into space saying we're sorry? Hope they hear us and decide to come home? No, Zethkari replied. We become worthy of their return. He gestured to the holographic displays showing human archives. Everything in those files represents what humans believed we could become together. Medical cooperation that saves lives instead of counting costs. Cultural exchange that celebrates differences instead of erasing them. Diplomatic solutions that create understanding instead of demanding surrender. Dr. Kesselin accessed her own data files. I propose we implement the Terran guidelines immediately. Use human protocols for all future conflict resolution. Restore the Mercy protocols. Restart the cultural exchange programs. That would be expensive, Councillor Drex rumbled. Inefficient. Yes, Zethkari agreed. It would cost us resources that could be used for other purposes. It would require us to care about things that don't directly benefit our own species. It would mean choosing compassion over convenience. He paused, looking around the chamber. It would mean becoming the kind of people humans believed we could be. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Arguments about cost, efficiency, and practicality. But underneath the technical discussions was a deeper question. What kind of galaxy did they want to live in? The turning point came from an unexpected source. Councillor Zarian, the mechanical being who had been among the strongest supporters of optimization, requested permission to speak. I have been analyzing the data from the human archives, he announced. Specifically, their cultural preservation projects. They saved 17,000 works of art, music, and literature from my people's past, including works I had forgotten existed. His lights flickered, and what those familiar with his species recognized as emotion. Among them was a song my creator used to sing to me when I was young, before I was upgraded to logical efficiency. I had not thought of that song in 300 years. I had not realized it was missing until humans gave it back to me. Zirian's voice carried a strange quality, something that sounded almost like wonder. Perhaps there are some inefficiencies worth preserving. The vote was closer than Zethkari had expected, 24 in favor, 23 against. But it was enough that the Terran guidelines were approved. The Mercy protocols were restored. Cultural exchange programs would resume within the month. Most importantly, a formal resolution was passed acknowledging that the Harmony Accords had been a mistake. Now what? Asked Admiral Cross as representatives began filing out of the chamber. Zethkari looked at the empty human seats. Now, we prove we meant what we just voted for. We show the galaxy that cooperation is possible without uniformity. That differences make us stronger, not weaker. Over the following months, the changes were gradual but real. Conflict resolution improved dramatically when mediators started using human techniques of understanding cultural motivations instead of simply imposing logical solutions. Art galleries reopened across the galaxy. Music competitions resumed. Children from different species began learning about each other's histories again. The improvements weren't without cost. Resources that could have been used for pure efficiency projects went to refugee assistance and cultural programs. Some conflicts took longer to resolve because negotiators spent time understanding all parties, instead of simply picking the most logical outcome. But wars started ending faster. Hatred between species began decreasing. And for the first time in years, young people across the galaxy began talking about hope again. 6 months after the vote, Zethkari stood in the council chamber, looking at a memorial that had been placed in the human section. Not a replacement for the empty seats, but a reminder of what had been lost and what might someday be regained. Any word? Asked Dr. Kessilin, joining him. Nothing, Zethkari replied. Every probe we've sent to search for them has found the same thing. No trace, no trail. It's as if they vanished completely. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching maintenance crews prepare for the next council session. The chamber looked different now. Color had returned. Art from various species decorated the walls again. The sterile efficiency of the Harmony Accords was being replaced by something that looked more like the old council. Do you think they're watching us? Kessilin asked. I hope so, Zethkari replied. I hope they can see that we're trying. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to the chamber. To their surprise, it was Ambassador Telandra of the Wanderer Coalition. The mysterious species rarely spoke during council sessions and almost never initiated private conversations. Councilor Zethkari, she said, her translation device converting her musical voice into standard galactic. I bring greetings from the coalition. Ambassador, Zethkari replied, curious about this unexpected visit. What brings you here? Telandra's three-eyed gaze moved between the memorial and the two officials. We have been watching your progress with interest. The changes you have implemented show promise. Thank you, Kessilin said. Though we still have much work to do. Indeed. Telandra moved closer to the memorial. The Wanderers have been traveling the galaxy for millennia. We have seen many civilizations rise and fall. We voted against the Harmony Accords, not because we opposed efficiency, but because we recognized the signs of a society choosing survival over soul. She touched the memorial gently. Humanity understood something most species never learn. That civilizations aren't built on laws or technology or even survival. They're built on the belief that tomorrow can be better than today, and the willingness to sacrifice for strangers. Zethkari felt his heart rate increase. Ambassador, are you saying? I am saying that the coalition knows where humanity went, Telandra confirmed. We have always known. They did not vanish. They found a place where they could build the kind of society they dreamed of creating with you. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Kessilin found her voice. Will you tell us where? Tilandra's expression was unreadable. When you prove you have truly learned from their departure. When the galaxy becomes the place they believed it could be. When you demonstrate that diversity and compassion are not weaknesses to be optimized away, but strengths to be celebrated. She turned to leave, then paused. You have made a good beginning. But earning redemption takes more than votes and speeches. It takes time, patience, and the courage to choose difficult kindness over easy efficiency. After she left, Zethkari and Cassilan stood alone in the chamber. How long do you think it will take? Cassilan asked. Zethkari looked at the memorial, then at the restored artwork around the chamber, then at the datapad in his hands, showing reports of successful diplomatic resolutions using human techniques. However long it takes, he said. We owe them that much. We owe ourselves that much. Outside the chamber's great windows, ships from dozens of different species docked at the station. For the first time in years, they were arriving for cultural exchange programs rather than emergency military meetings. It was a start. And maybe, if they proved worthy of it, it would be enough. In the distance, just beyond sensor range, a small ship watched the station with interest. Its crew observed the changes, recorded the progress, and sent a brief message to coordinates unknown to the Council. The message contained only 2 words. They're trying. The response came back immediately. Keep watching. Humanity was patient. They could wait.